Welcome to today's lesson of solving equations using the distributive property. So far you have focused on one-step and two-step equations, and today we're going to take this a step farther and look at multi-step equations that involve the distributive property, and that might also include looking at variables on both sides. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start with a little bit of a review on two-step equations. And when we talk about two-step equations, that just means that you have to solve two steps in order to be able to find your variable. So with this one, we know we have f over 5, which means f divided by 5, plus 2 equals 8. So looking at the first equation, we know that we're going to start with any addition or subtraction because we're really following PEMDAS backwards when we're undoing an equation trying to solve for that variable. So we're going to start by subtracting 2 on both sides, and we're left with f over 5. We know that this cancels out due to our additive inverse property, equals 8 minus 2, which is 6. Okay? This shows division, f divided by 5. So in order to get rid of that 5 in the denominator, we're going to multiply by 5 on both sides. These cancel. We're left with f is equal to 30. All right, let's look at our next question, which is ft plus 3 over 4 is equal to 1. So in this equation, we have a numerator that has an operation and a denominator, no operation there. When we have a denominator like this, our very first thing that we want to do is get rid of that denominator. We can't get rid of this plus 3 yet because we've got to get rid of this denominator first. So that always is going to be your first step. So we're going to multiply times 4 on both sides. This cancels, and we're left with 5t plus 3 is equal to 1 times 4, which is 4. Now we have our basic equation to solve. We're going to subtract 3 on both sides. T is equal to 1, and then our final step is to divide by 5, and t is equal to 1/5. Okay? We could go back in and plug this to check it. So let's try to check our answer by evaluating. So we had 5 times t, which now we know is 1/5, plus 3 over 4. And we're trying to see, does that equal 1? Well, let's go ahead and follow our order of operations, would tell us that we're going to do what's in our numerator first, and we're going to start with multiplication. 5 times 1/5 is just 1 plus 3. That gives us 4 in our numerator. Our denominator is still 4. And we know that anytime we have a number over itself, as in 4 over 4, that gives us 1 whole, so our answer does check out. Okay, let's look at our steps for solving multiple steps. So just looking at step 1, our very first step is going to be to distribute to get rid of parentheses. So this is all about the distributive property. We want to get rid of those parentheses first. Second, we want to combine any like terms. Third, we want to get rid of the number farthest away from the variable. So this is usually adding or subtracting a constant. It's not always, but most of the times it will be either adding or subtracting that constant. And then step 4, we're going to divide both sides by our coefficient. I should say multiply or divide by our coefficient. So let's look at a couple of examples. We see parentheses here, so we know that we are going to have the distributive property. And remember, to distribute, we're distributing that factor to both terms inside of parentheses. So this becomes 5x plus 10 is equal to negative 35. Now we have a two-step equation that we can solve. We're going to start by working farthest from the variable, which is our plus 10, so to get rid of that we have minus 10. We're left with 5x on the left side of the equal sign, And then on the right side, we have a negative 35 and a negative 10. That same signs add and keep. So we have negative 45. Our final step is going to be to divide to get rid of that 5. So we're going to divide by 5 on both sides, and we're left with x is equal to negative 45 divided by 5, which is 9. We can plug this in. Where we see x, we now have 9. So 9 plus 2 gives us 11. And I can see that I did something wrong there, which is a great mistake to have made. My answer should have been negative 9. Let's see how that changes once we check. Negative 9 plus 2 gives me negative 7 inside parentheses. 5 times negative 7 gives me negative 35, so it checks. That checking step is so important. Go back and evaluate with what you have found for your variable to make sure that your answer is correct. All right, let's look at this again. We've got parentheses, so we want to get rid of it using the distributive property. We have negative 2m, and then we have negative 2 times positive 3. That gives me negative 6. We also have negative 5m, and that all equals negative 34. On this equation, I notice that I have some like terms that need to be simplified next. I always want to take time to see, do I have any like terms that can be combined? So I have negative 2m and negative 5m, that becomes negative 7m. Minus 6 is equal to negative 34. So now I am ready to solve my equation, working farthest away from the variable first, so plus 6 plus 6. I'm left with negative 7m is equal to, here I have different signs subtract. So I'm going to be left with a negative 28. Finally, I'm going to divide by negative 7. And I'm left with m is equal to negative divided by negative gives me a positive 4. So m is equal to 4. Let's go back and check that just to make sure. So if we plug in 4, everywhere we see m, we're going to see if we get negative 34. So we're going to do what's in parentheses. Notice you don't have to distribute. When you don't have a variable, you can go ahead and solve what's inside. So negative 2 times 7, which gives me negative 14. And then I have minus 5 times 4 gives me minus 20. And here I have same signs add and keep, or you might see it as keep, change, change. Either way, you're going to get to the same answer, so plus a negative 20. And that gives me negative 34, which checks out. Let's talk about the steps if we end up with variables on both sides. So step 1 is to simplify each side of the equation using the distributive property or combining like terms. So make sure that on each side of your equal sign, you have the expression in simplest terms. You've simplified it by combining or distributing. In step 2, it says to combine variables on the same side of the equal sign. A tip is to make sure that you move the variable to the side where it will remain positive. You do not have to do that, but it's just a helpful tip. Step 3, combine all constants on the opposite side of the equal sign. So wherever you have put the variable, move all the constants to the opposite side of the equal sign. And then step 4, solve the equation to isolate the variable. Let's look at some of these examples. Notice that we have variables on both sides in both of these equations. I have an a on the left and the right in the first equation. So let's look at this. We've got 8a minus 3 plus 2a. Now, if I'm looking at that left side, my first step was to make sure I simplify on both sides of the equal sign. And when I say simplify, I want to have combined any terms and gotten rid of parentheses. So the very first thing I want to do is get rid of these parentheses, and we know that we do that by distributing. If we don't have a factor outside of our parentheses, we can look at that as a -1, an invisible 1 that's outside of it. Now we can distribute and get rid of the parentheses. 8a, -1 times 3 is -3, and -1 times a positive 2a is -2a. We can combine these terms, 8a and -2a, to get 6a minus 3, and that's the simplest we can go on this left side of our equation. And then on the right side we have 3a plus 1. Now, my helpful tip was to move the variable to the side where it will remain positive. So, if we took 6a and moved it here to the right, we would subtract 6a from both sides. 3a minus 6a would give us a negative variable. So instead, we're going to move 3a to the left side. So let's do that. We have a positive 3a, so we're just going to subtract 3a. We're going to subtract 3a from 6a. So we're left with 3a minus 3 is equal to 1. Now we want to move our constants to the opposite side. So since we moved our variables to the left, we're going to move our constants to the right. So -3, to move it to the right, we're going to add 3. And we're left with 3a is equal to positive 4. Our last step is going to be to divide by 3. So 3a is equal to 4. I'm going to divide by 3 on both sides. I'm left with a is equal to 4/3, or 1 1/3. Okay? In my second example, we have x on both sides, and we see also that we have parentheses. So our first step is going to be to get rid of those. We want to simplify on both sides this time because there is something we can do to simplify it on both sides of the equal sign. So we have 4x minus 16 is equal to 36 minus 20x. Again, we can move 20x. We want to put our variables on the same side. And by adding 20x to both sides, I end with a positive 24x. Those are going to cancel out. So 24x minus 16, I'm just copying everything else down, equals 36. I moved my variable to the left, so I'm going to move my constants to the right. Notice how I'm keeping everything lined up neatly. I know that this cancels, and I'm left with 24x equals 52. All right, my last step is to divide by 24. So x is equal to 24 will go into 52 2 times. That gives me 48. So 4 left over 24. That will simplify. So x is equal to 2/1/6. Okay, I want you to pause the video and try these on your own. Check your answers and see how you did. I hope you felt like you have learned a lot in this lesson, and we will continue working. Good luck on all of your lessons this week and finishing up your activities.